Welcome everyone to Control Shift Live, the first in a four-part series exploring the future of control rooms. I'm Chris Dreyfus-Gibson, Managing Director at DG Advisory and Vice Chair of the International Critical Control Rooms Alliance. Over the next month, we'll be tackling some of the biggest questions facing mission-critical control room environments, from AI and integration to operator well-being and human factors. Today, we start with a theme that should be top of mind for every control room leader. How do we manage complexity and make smarter decisions in the face of growing data? Control rooms today aren't short of data, they're saturated with it. And that's where cognitive control rooms come in. Not to replace people, but to empower them through intelligent systems that filter, interpret, and guide action. I'll be joined today by a brilliant panel from across policing, rail, and security technology, all leading this shift in their respective fields. So let's first set the context. From CCTV and alarms to sensors, logs, communications, operators are navigating more data streams than ever before. But here's the paradox. More data doesn't always mean better decisions. In fact, without the right tools and processes, it often slows us down. The challenge now is no longer data collection, but it's comprehension. And that's exactly what we'll be discussing here today. I'm predicting three important areas which will give cognitive control rooms focus, enhanced situational awareness, smarter decision-making, and operational efficiency. With that in mind, let's see if our panelists agree. Joining me today, three experts to discuss this subject. First, we have Marie Tyler, Executive Director at the International Professional Security Association and Head of Strategic Partnerships at the Game Changer. Hello, Marie. We also... Oh, hello, Marie. There you are. And joining Marie, we have Gary Rowe from Network Rail. Gary is Incident Controller and Digital Innovation Lead at Network Rail's Anglia Route Control Centre. Hello, Gary.
Good morning.
And last but definitely not least, David Jackson joining us from Woodthorpe Consultancy, where he's founder and CEO, a veteran of public safety control room operations, and joins me at the International Critical Control Rooms Alliance as our director for the European chapter. Hello, David.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone.
Well, welcome all three of you to Control Shift Live. Quick note for our audience today, if you are watching live, and if you do have any questions for the panel, please add them in the comments below. We will try and cover as many of those as possible towards the end of the session. So let's start with the big picture question, and I'll come to each of you in turn. What does a cognitive control room mean to you, and what are the operational challenges that are requiring you or your customers to rethink their operations in this way? Marie, I'll start with you. You've been going around talking to control room operators. What are they saying?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. And although I've been in the security industry for years, talking specifically to each of those different stakeholders, there are some challenges that are similar to all and some are very different. I think everybody recognizes the opportunity with AI in a control room, but the biggest, I suppose, line or hurdle to get by is always this resistance to change. And I don't think that's new to AI environments. I think that's just, in the security industry, of course, we're cautious about what we do because, we're dealing with security here. But at the same time, are an innovative culture, technology, but, really properly embracing AI and just change in general. Although it's possible to flicker this new technology, it clearly, there's that, and we were talking before this, this response, making that decision. And, I suppose once the big players start to take these big leaps, everybody will follow, because they'll see, actually, this is absolutely. So I think also education is a big part of it, and helping people to understand that it doesn't need to be a rip and replace model, that actually there are ways now from the old way of working to this much more streamlined and innovative way of working, and really understanding only to the individual operator on the front line being more efficient, but also what it's going to help with the business, having being able to be more efficient, more strategic, and rather than being this sort of reactive culture of drowning in false alarms and all the things. Actually, their operators get to be more strategic in what they do, and they become actually a key part to the business. It's going to come out of that. It's great. So far, just to sort of summarize, everybody that I'm talking to, I don't think I've necessarily seen a shut door. I think the door is either shut, or certainly with the smaller companies ready to take a chance. Not that it is a chance, but take a chance on change. And certainly with the going on, people are starting to realize, do you know what? If we don't move forward, we're going to fall behind.
Okay, so really a strategic imperative from a business point of view, perhaps, to start to look at this in order to support staff. Gary, you're in the thick of it, on the front line, if you like, within the control room environment, and leading work at Network Rail around digital innovation, use of AI and automation. What does the cognitive control room mean for you and your colleagues?
I think having the use of AI within the control room is about giving the controllers the right support at the right time and filtering out all that noise, like Marie mentioned about, or it was yourself, Chris, mentioned about the amount of information that's available to us. If we can have tools that help us act faster with more confidence, then they're not there, like the tech's not there to replace us, it's there to help us, and it should be seen as more of an ally. I think anything that's used should be, because like I am a controller and I'm designing things to be used in control, it's about having systems designed that understand the pressure that the controllers are under, to work with them and not against them.
And are you, sort of following on from some of the conversations perhaps Marie has had, are you finding that your colleagues are supportive? Is there a sort of skepticism, a caution? What's the mood within the controller community?
With some of it, it's kind of split. I think there is the challenge of trust and adoption, making sure that the phrase that comes up a lot is human in the loop, or human makes the ultimate final decision. So it's about demonstrating to people that are on the fence and unsure and showing them the benefits. But I think the concerns really boil down to, if you're using these tools to help you make decisions, at the end of it, who's responsible and who's accountable, and making sure that they're not relied on fully, they're there to support you, and it is still the human at the end. I think one of the other challenges is that the tech and AI is evolving rapidly, and the internal processes and the governance are struggling to keep up with that.
Okay. David, you're supporting policing at the moment, a long career in public safety. Where does the cognitive control room lie in sort of emergency services and I guess sort of managing quite high levels of risk?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think really, in order to answer this question, you've got to look at whereabouts the sector is coming from. And in my sector, which is public safety, this has been a very, very highly processed and regulated environment. So it would not surprise people to know that in many organisations that I work with, some have still got a standard operating procedure on how to write a standard operating procedure. It's that processed and that highly regulated. The second problem, I think, that when we're thinking about change and future, is that historically, when anyone's talked about IT, 95% of the conversation has been around the T and only 5% around the I. And we're now starting to wake up that data is king. And in any control room, cognitive or otherwise, one of the key things that any leader should be doing is making sure the right data is in front of the right person at the right moment in time in order to make those robust decisions that critical control room staff have to make. So with that in mind, I think that where we are seeing AI, and I slightly disagree with Gary around human always being in the loop, because there are certain times when when technology and the data can act autonomously. And I go back to a piece of research by two researchers from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 1978, these researchers were called Sheridan and Verplank, and they came up with 10 different scenarios and 10 growing levels of autonomous decision making by technology. And I've used that model many, many times before when looking at, if there is a decision to be made, whereabouts does the human actually need to be involved in that? What level of decision needs to be made by a human? Where can the human co-create the decision with technology, and where perhaps could technology act autonomously? And I'll just give a couple of examples here. Let's say, for example, you're calling an organization and you get greeted by, welcome to the Acme company. In a few words, tell us why you're calling us today so that we can direct your call. Well, that's AI, and absolutely technology can act autonomously there. You might have a time, and we certainly do within public safety, where you're always going to want to have a human in the loop. Technology may, for example, down select some options for you, but the human makes the decision. Going a little bit further up the Sheridan and Verplank scale, the technology may suggest one of the options for you to implement, but the human has to agree to it. Flip that around. The technology may say that's the decision you're going to make, but the human can veto it. And if we go back to Sheridan and Verplank, and I deliberately left this point to last, when they wrote their paper in 1978, they were talking about autonomous decision making in the context of nuclear submarines. And so that probably brings into sharp focus that blended approach. And so my approach has always been with organizations, look at the decision you need to make. Can technology support you? Can the technology get the right data in front of the right person at the right moment in time? That for me is the sweet spot when it comes to cognitive control rooms and how we leverage technology to make those decisions in a much more informed, exacting and precise way.
Very interesting. I think so. Obviously, that's an academic paper and looking at a high risk environment. I don't know nuclear submarines. I'd be interested to know if that industry or the Navy sort of took that on, and what level of automated decision making there is there. I want to come back to, I think, a point that both Marie and Gary made, which is about trust. So we know that the technology is capable of making decisions of various complexities, but is the question around whether we operationalize that one that's much more about trust and accountability than it is about technology? Gary, perhaps, given that David disagreed with you, perhaps come back on that.
I understand what he was referring to with AI. He's quite right with the point he makes there. I was kind of just relating it to the control room that I'm in, that we would need to keep the accountability with us.
When we were chatting sort of before going live, you posed a really interesting sort of question.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
perhaps
sort of offer that to David. So I've got a tool that I've been working on just to improve the quality of the log and the sort of consistency and professionalism and tone of the messaging. So if AI is used to regenerate or rephrase a controller's log entry just to improve the tone and clarity, so I might log in a bullet point fashion, I can get it to regenerate it as a paragraph that would be much more suitable for paging out to stakeholders. I'll still check it. I might tweak it a little bit, but the question is, would you be able to class that as a personal human log entry in the scenario or the setting of a coroner's court, where I might be asked by the coroner, are all these log entries your own? Would I be able to confidently answer yes?
I think it's a really interesting point, actually, Gary. And yes, we have trial technology within public safety that co-creates a narrative. In that particular scenario, the position that I think that the sector's in at the moment is it has to be the human's entry. If the human has used technology to augment, so long as they remain happy and it's reduced the time it's taken them to draft it, etc., etc., etc. But if they are the words the human would have wanted to use, then I would suggest that remains the entry of the human that actually wrote it, whether or not they wrote it from long-handed from their own thoughts, or whether they augmented the quality of that using technology. It still remains the human's entry. It's where the level of autonomy, and each sector is going to be different. The level of autonomy of the technology is going to be a key critical point here. But certainly within the justice sector, there are ongoing conversations around technology drafted or technology authored scripts that and the acceptability of those for the purpose of subsequent legal proceedings, etc. It's a very, very live debate, and in the conversations I've had with colleagues across those sectors, there still remains to this day a very divided view on that as to what is the acceptable level of augmentation that a technology should provide to something that essentially is owned or is accountable to a named individual.
Marie, you work a lot more in the sort of private security sector and that area. Where's the level of risk appetite, if you like, or the level of appetite for automation, for bringing AI in line?
I would definitely say there is an appetite. I don't think I think it really is. It's the risk factor of migrating a system to a new system that seems to be the more common, not everybody, but the most common piece. And I thought, by the way, just because I know you brought me here to make it a bit fun, right? Not that everyone else isn't fun, but I thought just for fun, I'll ask AI to help us come up with an analogy that helps bring out some fun words on here that stand out. So it'd be interesting to know what everyone thinks about this. The first one is called syndrome, and it says, it's like trying to sell a Tesla to someone who spent 30 years mastering the art of horse grooming. But my actual favorite is the second one, which is called Grandpa's Remote Control. Modern systems are like giving your grandpa a smart TV remote. He just wants the old one with the 2 buttons. And on that second one, which I think is perhaps more relatable, it then goes on to say, legacy operators are used to tools that do one thing well. AI systems, dashboards, and automation can feel like overkill. See how it makes their job not harder. And so obviously the point here is it's really going to be the proofs in the pudding. I think until it and trial it for themselves and see the benefits. And as I mentioned, they are obviously key. They are the ones using it. But actually those other ones, the shift manager for efficiency, the end user or the owner, to see the output that they're getting, they're going to get more out. They're going to get more out of the system. They can onboard and scale, in minutes and not, because everything is now way slicker and more efficient as long as you're on the right tool.
Yes.
So I'm waffling, but I thought I'd throw that in there because I thought, we all relate at least to the remote situation.
Absolutely. And you touched there on making the job easier or more efficient. I mentioned in the introduction, we've got this expansion of data sources, right? I go into some control rooms as I sort of nose around that have walls of CCTV, or walls of screens that have sort of tiny little sort of CCTV blocks for somebody to try and monitor, which of course, from a human cognition point of view, is extremely difficult and to do. And whatever screens you're watching, you can bet that whatever the incident is on the screen you're not watching. And add to that, alarms going off all the time and radio comms and telephone calls. There is a lot there for operators to juggle and manage. And my desire for cognitive control rooms is to really simplify all of that data. And David, I think you, both you and Gary, I think, mentioned it earlier on, getting the right information to the right operator at the right time to allow them to do what they need to do, make the decision, take some action, or whatever it is at that moment. Gary, you've been working on various tools to help your colleagues. Tell us a little bit about the technology side, and then I'd like to at some point talk about the people side of this.
Okay. So the things I've been building have mainly been for solving daily problems that the controllers on the railway face, whether it be new starters or people that have been there much longer. As you said, it is about making the information available. So one of the tools is a national and standard operating procedure kind of prompter. So when you have a different incident type, you can find that quickly, and it's procedural. It goes through the actions that you need to take, collects the information and puts it into the log. So it reduces perhaps the mental load of the controller so that they can focus more on managing the actual incident, just to free them up. It's the technology on that one is not AI, but you could use the sort of back-end knowledge base of those incidents and actions to build plenty of useful tools. But mainly it's just using web wrappers, a front end, a nice web app, and calling on APIs for, in Network Rail's world, we're using Copilot. But it's not incredibly difficult to achieve some nice, simple solutions that make people's lives easier. And like Marie said, it's sort of people on the fence until they realise the benefit, and then they're all over it.
And Marie, in your world at the Game Changer, what sort of technologies are you thinking about to support your customers?
So even prior to Game Changer, which is obviously launching very soon, just even with our current platform, it's always been about, and we've touched on it in a few areas, but it's sorting the efficiency piece, the operational efficiency, making us more as humans, making sure that we can enable people, they can provide more services and also tailored to more customers. So, that piece, and with the automation. We mentioned about taking the burden away from the human and the right information and so on. But more so, control rooms to generate more revenue. In the room, always, where's the, isn't it, in the security industry generally, even down to buying your camera, so being able to provide control rooms that enables the human element to be good. So, the humans, the efficient, as you say, the stress levels, would be less, because that's for the value that they bring when the lone worker is having to be attacked or have been attacked. And, having a conversation with an AI probably wouldn't be as effective as talking to a human in that type of scenario. So human can bring value, of course, but perhaps that would not have happened, that conversation, had they been bogged down with 10,000 false alarms. So that noise needs to be reduced. Can do their bit. But back to the owner and the shift manager and getting that efficient, being able to do more. They're under pressure from their customers. Back to the key holder. Why do you keep calling me? What's the issue? Why? False alarm, but they have to call the key holder. The key holder has to go, is what they've agreed as the workflow for that scenario. Great if actually saying, you don't need to go because it was a fox running across the thing. Oh, there's a spider on the camera. We've already, sorted it, or whatever. Or even if there are some scenarios where they still have to go because the alarm went off. But I know from talking to those end users in very high risk scenarios, they still want to know why. And often they still don't get. And so knowing the why and then eradicating that for future, happy days, So, but that obviously for everybody, we know this with AI and everything we do, as you say, once people, even down to the ChatGPTs, we all know can do. Why wouldn't you embrace it? But I say yes, but it needs to be on our terms. We're talking security, fire, or these are high risk situations. So I love that we're having these conversations, and that actually it's not new anymore. It's not about whether you're going to do it or not. How are you going to do it? How are you going to implement it? How are you going to make it work for you? And I think if you've got a slick tool, which selfishly I believe the game changer, and do it in a unified way and not have to plug into fragmented systems. I think this is what anyway, is that it's not that there aren't solutions out there, but they seem to be generally fragmented. And that in itself is running the control room, because again, back to simplifying, there shouldn't be the need to have multiple, back to your screens already with the footage that's coming in. Why on earth are we using also multiple systems to get a result when actually be unified? It should be automated, and it should be in a way that is adding value. The customer, it's not a sales pitch, but whatever the solution, that's what we should be giving control rooms to be ultimately efficient.
David, what are you saying public safety wise from a technology point of view?
So I think in technology, there's probably a few main areas where certainly organizations are exploring the potential for technology. First one is around predicting and forecasting. So think about a contact center, for example, which for many organizations is an integral part of their control room. Control rooms have been forecasting future call volumes for over 100 years. The Erlang formula, which is a formula that's used to calculate how many staff you need on duty at any one point, was designed in the 1920s and became an international standard in 1947. So it's pretty robust and it does work. But fast forward to, I'm aware of one EMS ambulance organisation here in the UK that is using technology to predict where the next life-changing cardiac event might be, so that they can ensure that they've got they can forward deploy a cardiac ambulance responder into that locality to minimise the response time when that event does happen. So I think prediction and forecasting is one area. We've already touched on the second area, which is trying to reduce the manual effort that is required, that takes place in so many control rooms. That might be, as I've said before, automating the search and retrieval of data and getting that data in front of the human It might be moving data from one system to another, Marie's point around legacy multiple systems, etc. So I think there's reducing the manual effort and allowing the human to focus not only on the parts of the process or the parts of the operation that the human needs to do and adds value to do, but just creates that more better work experience, that more better environment for the human to really feel that they are adding value to the control room operation. And then just on that well-being thing, I'm also seeing quite a lot of moves at the moment and focusing on control room well-being and how technology, using all of this myriad of data, Chris, as we've already spoken about, how actually can we look not only to see what is the well-being of our control room staff through the use of things like wearables to detect heart rate variation and that sort of stuff, to also giving early warning to somebody that may well be starting to struggle, and then adjusting their workload accordingly through automation if necessary, to allow that person to prevent having an incident which causes them to have to just say, I'm sorry, I just need half hour off the floor or half hour away from my screen, etc. How can we actually balance that productivity with the well-being? So there's three areas really I'm seeing, but the biggest area is the second one, and that is automating the processes that the manual processes that we've done the same way for donkey's years, be that search and retrieval of information. And then finally, I suppose, as a kind of a 2A section to that, and this is something we're certainly exploring in public safety, based on the context of what you are dealing with, so the incident type that you're actually handling, you don't want to have a data tsunami coming at you because that's just going to overwhelm somebody. So how do you layer the data in a way that this is the information you absolutely need to know now as a controller? Right, okay, I've got that. I call that the custard pie. It's the data that's pushed in your face. You need to know that this patient is allergic to a particular type of drug. This person is potentially, or this location is potentially dangerous, etc. Then you've got back to the minimizing the manual effort. Then you've got the data that's one click away. This is really important, but I'm not going to custard pie it in your face. And then actually, here's all the other data that we know about this particular person or event or location, etc. So you layer the data accordingly. And this is where I think technology really is helping us in public safety, and contextually ordering that according to the relevance of the incident that you're currently handling.
Brilliant, thank you. Just want to touch on a little bit more on the sort of human element, the operator experience part. And David, you mentioned well-being, and I agree, certainly seeing huge amounts more conversation, not just in control rooms, but across sort of the security industry more widely. Marie, I know you've been involved with a lot of those conversations as well. How do we measure, as we're introducing these technologies, that it's working for the operator? Gary, perhaps as you've been sort of trialing these bits of technology that you've been building, how do you get a sense that it's the right thing delivered in the right way?
I was just thinking with what David was just saying. I was just thinking about complacency, because if the AI tools are used too much, is there a risk that that the human kind of stops thinking? And can we afford that in control? You lose all that knowledge and experience in the hope that an AI model is trained on it. And then when you do have an incident, so yeah, I'm not sure the best way to answer it. So I was caught up in thinking about perhaps relying on the tools too much, and there'd be less support and more substitution of them, and then staff stop questioning it and just start using it without much consideration.
That poses a really interesting question then. We've got people that maybe have 20, 30 years in control rooms. I was at a control room yesterday, somebody who'd been there for about 20 years. And of course, we've got we've always done it like this sort of syndrome, perhaps. But there is something about having good experienced operators and controllers that can train the AI. What happens as generations of control room staff move on, and we have people that are perhaps only used to using AI and automation supporting tools in order to do their job?
When the scenario is not in the AI and you've got an inexperienced controller, no one's going to know what to do, are they?
So what's the answer? The audience will want to know.
It's a bit like the question back on the what I posed to David. It really divides the room because people are sort of really unsure about it. I need to think a bit more about that one.
David, is this a concern from a public safety point of view?
Absolutely. And this is where the leadership bit comes in, really. Futurology leadership. I think everyone would recognise, no matter what sector, there are probably parts of the operation of a control room that are ripe for efficiency. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean to say we should continue to do it that way. When I was a child, if I wanted to meet my friends on Friday evening, we would meet by the phone box, and we'd make the arrangements on Tuesday. And if anyone was going to be late, you would call the phone box to say you're going to be late. No mobile phones, no SMS service, no nothing like that. So we have moved on. But I absolutely take Gary's point that there is, particularly in critical control rooms, and I think one of the audience has put a message on there that no one's going to fully automate their control room. Absolutely. You've also, of course, my view is you've got to plan if suddenly the technology is not available. What do you do then? What is your backup and resilience plan? So yes, there is absolutely a human, but for me, the leadership bit looks at whereabouts can you potentially create capacity within the humans to add greater value. So that may well be from the experience. It may well be from time saved because you've automated some previously necessary manual tasks. I'll give an example where there's an ongoing trial at the moment. About two examples, Chris, if I may. An ongoing trial at the moment that's looking at risk and vulnerability. So can technology, the exam question is, can technology better identify risk and vulnerability than an experienced human? And in one particular case, I can't talk too much about it, but the initial results of that trial suggested that that the technology was being able to identify risk and vulnerability in 20% more of example cases than a human did. And then but this goes back onto the next bit. And I think when we're talking about, particularly around artificial intelligence, one of the absolute imperatives that people who are designing AI need to do is to, and it's a horrible phrase and I hate saying it, but I call it the transparency of explainability. So this is the tool explaining why it is said there's vulnerability here, and demonstrating in simple language to the human as to why the technology has made a recommendation, decision, call it what you will. We've done some A/B testing on this within public safety, and when we didn't play back the explainability, what we saw with the experienced controllers was they started to distrust the technology.
Okay.
When we played the explanation, the technology generated explanation as to why it had said there's vulnerability in this because ... Not only did the human agree with the technology, but we found that the trust in the technology amplified significantly. So there's a really interesting interplay between human trust and the transparency of what the technology is doing. And I think there is a sweet spot when you think about leadership, and I absolutely accept Gary's point around de-skilling people. I think actually you can flip that on its head. And if you have that transparency of explainability module, you can actually even develop the human to become even better at, in this case, risk and vulnerability identification. So there's a really interesting interplay there between technology and human psychology and human capability.
Interesting. And I wonder whether...
You said as well,
Chris,
I was just going to say, and also when you were saying before that around what isn't available, it's like, you've gone leap bounds over here, and what about the people left behind? And that's one of the things that I thought personally was very useful, certainly what we do anyway, is workflow management, right? And so, everything is documented. It's just you're deciding whether it's done by the AI or whether the human is doing it. Or even, in fact, perhaps there's certain checkpoints that, of course, the human has to sign them off. But that it's not that saying we need to get to this endpoint, and actually, as humans, we decided what the steps are, and the workflow is identified and documented. And actually, what you're actually doing is using a tool to take care of some of those tasks for you, as opposed to this AI to make decisions, is what I'm seeing.
And I wonder whether that point around explainability perhaps feeds into the sort of dilemma Gary posed at the beginning around, is this my log entry or not, right? If you were in court and said, or during an inquiry, whatever, and said, well, how did you come up with this, this text? Actually being able to explain how the technology, where the technology got the information from, for example, how it reworded it. I think that we're back to that trust element, which seems quite central to this being a successful concept. Sorry, Gary, go on.
I was going to say, touching on the adoption of it, you could have a fairly new starter. As David said, you flip it on its head, it can be used to accelerate the learning curve for new starters, and also allows them to have a really detailed log of an incident. So then when we come to do compliance checks to check a controller's competency, all of the evidence is there. But then when you have someone that's been on the job for 20 plus years and they know what they're doing and they're doing it, they might not just be recording the evidence in the log. When it comes to be doing the competency checks on them, they'll be graded or scored lower than the new starter. They've done the piece, there's just no evidence of it. So there's the benefits there as well, and the adoption would come from the person that's been on 20 years. Might, if it's there's nothing in the log, they might get put on an action plan, and then how do you get off the action plan? Perhaps start adopting and using the tool that's available.
I think I want to get on to some final sort of audience questions, but I think you've hit on an interesting point that we haven't covered in the discussion, which is the cognitive control room as a learning environment, and the ability to learn from sort of historical incidents and data in order to improve future operations. And maybe there's a whole discussion to be had around that as well. Just a couple of points that have gone in the chat and comments that we've had. AI and emotion, right? So AI, a comment from one of the listeners, AI can't bring emotion like a controller can to, a conversation, to an incident. is that important? Is that a good thing? Is it a downside? Marie, what do you think?
I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing that it can't do emotion, because it just gives back the power to the human again. And, you know, back to AI do the bit that isn't human, like reducing the false alarm, you know, bringing, you know, the real life events to the human's attention, and, you know, take away the noise and allow the human to bring their impact, whether that be emotional impact, that worker example I used earlier, and having to converse with somebody who's in a traumatic situation, right through to just actually making logical calls based on what we know as humans needs to be done. So I think it's great that AIs can't be emotional. Otherwise, what is the human versus the AI? I think it's a great collaboration. And I think at the end of the day, a smart control room uses AI to be powered by people that are brave enough to use it and understand that it's going to empower your people to not be sitting there clicking false alarms all day, actually bringing their human values.
Thank you. Gary, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Marie there. I think it is a good thing that it's not emotional, because some of the things that I've been playing with, like natural language conversational AI, if it was to take detailed messages of incidents, or you know, we have occasions where someone might be hurling abuse at you down the phone, or being impatient and trying to sort of push your buttons. An AI in that scenario is going to
divert it to AI, Gary, at that point.
Yeah. It'll
I'm not taking that.
Yeah, it'll stay completely neutral, and the same with the logging aspect. Some people can log, and they might put a bit of opinion in there, which is not something that we're supposed to do. But if we're using the AI tool to slightly rephrase, keep it professional, so it can be paged out to stakeholders, then it keeps it consistent no matter which one. In my role, there's sort of 15 of us. Doesn't matter who's on, what time of day it is, 12-hour shift, it could be 3 a.m, and you're just sort of lagging a bit. The AI not being emotional helps improve things and keep it consistent and be neutral, because it's more process driven than emotional. So I think that is actually a good thing.
And David, you know, policing, public safety gets lots of griefy calls and people in distress.
So I'm going to actually go in a completely different direction, because AI can be emotional. So one of the things that we've developed is a synthetic call generator. So, you know, an AI, generative AI, that will play the role of a frightened man, you know, in their retired, etc., can create a persona, and the AI will play the role. We use it for training, training contact center staff. So in that way, AI can appear to be emotional. But I think, you know, aside from that, I think this is one of the kind of the real crux of the thought leadership pieces around this. I was just actually, as both Marie and Gary were talking, there's a great article on LinkedIn by somebody called Fabrizio Bocci, and it's entitled "Digital Transformation and Technological Debt." And in this article, it's 2019, this article, but Fabrizio talks about Astro Teller, who used to be the CEO of Alphabet X, so Google's parent company's kind of futurology. And Astro talks about that, you know, human adaptability and digital transformation or technology transformation. If you were to plot those on a graph and the rate of change, what Astro has been quoted as saying is that technology innovation is now accelerating much greater than humans' ability to adapt to it. And I think that when we're looking at cognitive control rooms and we're looking at technology, and particularly some of the AI stuff and the rate of change that's happening there, good leaders in this space will very quickly determine where AI has a place in the future control operations and where humans have a role in this space. And the fact that if you deploy AI in a non-emotive way, it can bring huge benefits, particularly around efficiency and make the humans' life in the control room much more productive. And as I said before, give that power of worth back to the human value. And one of the questions I love to ask when I go into control rooms is to ask the staff, why did you join this particular, this job? Why are you doing this role? And in many cases, and particularly in public safety, but the same applies across a number of different sectors, people want to feel like they're adding value in their effort with work. If they feel like they're adding value, that will automatically unlock the discretionary effort within a human. So if you are unlocking that discretionary effort, you're getting more productivity as a control room leader out of them, and you're allowing people to feel that they are doing their job, they're doing it well, and they're adding value to either their peers, to the company mission, to the operation of the control room, etc. All of that, and I think, from a leadership point of view, understanding where technology helps and working out where technology hinders in this environment of technology innovation is going to be an absolute critical requirement for leaders in this space in the next year, 2, 5, 10 years.
Brilliant. So very quickly before we finish, a final thought from each of you, if I may. If there are, and I'm hoping there are many control room leaders watching this, what's your one bit of advice for the leader that's thinking, how do I get started with this cognitive control room stuff? Marie.
Sure. I would like to pick up, and I noticed some comments, and the operator should get their hands on things. The one consistent thing that I have experienced with all of the different control room companies that I've spoken to, and I'm very pleased that this is the fact, is a conversation, and you understand that, of course, there is only positivity that can come out of this situation. Before they make any decisions, every single one, I want my operator to play with it first. So I love the fact that they want that. They value the operator, their experience. They obviously want it to be used. That's one element. But I don't think it's just that. I don't think it's just about it being easy for them to use. They do value their operators and emotions. I'm a very emotional person. So I suppose the only thing I would say is, and I chat out with my ChatGPT, and I really do enjoy a session with my AI all the time. But we all say this quite a lot, being authentic is also extremely valuable. So I think it's great for bouncing ideas and, pulling things together and so on. But actually, when it really comes down to the situation, we're talking about potentially life and death situations. Authenticity will only ever come from a human being.
Thank you. Gary, final thought. How do we get started with cognitive control rooms?
I think, like myself, because I've been temporarily seconded out of my incident controller role to help come up with innovations, workflow improvements. I think for me, to support that, it's to back the people already in their control rooms that are already fixing problems. I would guess, I've spoken to other people like myself in other routes, most control rooms have already got someone who's building workarounds, dashboards, scripts, and other things in the background to support their role. Identify those people, give them the space and the time and the permission to build them properly. And as part of that, explore the opportunities that AI is bringing to the table.
Gary, thank you. And David?
Can't really add much more to the points that Marie or Gary have made, really. when you asked that question, I had 2 points in my head, Chris. The first is to any control room leader. I would place money on the fact that at least 80% of your control room's budget is spent on people. So as a leader, you should be spending a minimum of 80% of your time looking after your most expensive and your most valuable asset, your people. Love the comment from a colleague who's listening in around allowing users early access to the technology, getting their feedback as part of your decision-making process as to whether to invest and deploy, etc. But then Gary's point, Gary kind of stole my thunder on my second point, which is, the best people to ask what are the problems that need solving in our control room are the people doing the job currently, because they know, and they'll have done workarounds, and everyone's got someone with an Excel spreadsheet or a little bit of a bit of a macro or something like that. So that then takes me back to my really key point. A lot of people think technology, AI particularly, is the panacea for everything. It may well be, but understand what are the problems you're trying to solve first. What is the problem, and why is the problem actually occurring? Only once you are happy and your teams are happy that you've got the what and the why properly defined, can you then start looking at how might we solve it. And so many times I've seen organizations invest in new capability because it's got flashy lights or it makes nice sounds or whatever it is, and then they're trying to reverse engineer it into an operation and a problem they didn't actually know how to articulate in the first place. So do the what and the why first, then you can talk about the how and all the great advice that we've spoken about already, and the audience have contributed in the comments too.
Brilliant. Well, look.
Quick one, Chris, if I may, if you don't mind. No, I'm sorry. Because actually, I think there were some really good points there. We talked earlier quickly, though, about the human brings to all of this. But actually, just to extend on David's point, that's why the system itself needs to add value as well, right? Please do make sure you choose the platform for you and the right solutions for you, because at the end of the day, you're completely right. Square pegs, one of the ones I went to visit, which is actually a very big, the amount of workarounds they've put into place and invested in, and stuck, and things are outdated, and it's just making it even more painful. Absolutely. Stop the workarounds, stop the sticky band-aids, as they say over in the States. Start moving forward, or you're going to get left behind.
Brilliant. Well, let's leave it there. That brings us to the end of our first session for Control Shift Live. Huge thank you to all three of you. Marie, David, Gary, thank you very much for joining us today. And next week, we're moving into week 2 of Control Shift and diving into integrated command center operations, breaking down silos, bringing departments, organizations together for more effective operations. To catch up with all the articles, posts, live sessions as part of this series, make sure you're subscribed to the Control Shift newsletter. And until then, stay curious, stay focused, and thank you for being part of the shift.